This December is Twilight's 20th anniversary, and that makes me feel like I've missed out on a cultural touchstone because I've never read Twilight. I've seen tiny snippets of the movie and I think I know a very rough idea of the premise. We have Bella Swan, she arrives in a new town, she gets a vampire boyfriend, but I don't actually know the plot. So I thought that for the 20th anniversary, if there was ever a time to read it, then it would be now. I assumed I would be able to get a copy of this from my library because I kind of thought that these were like part of the brickwork at this point, but nowhere had it. So I ended up buying myself a secondhand copy with my actual person money, and so I thought that I will read Twilight. As I'm doing that, I will rebind this copy. I personally really enjoy bookbinding, but I haven't found a way to include it in this channel yet. I really got into bookbinding as a hobby last year, something I want to share with you guys, but I don't think it justifies having its own videos. So I'm gonna try Twilight, and while I'm giving you my thoughts on it, I will have some b-roll of the bookbinding process. If you don't want to listen to me talk about Twilight, you can just mute the video. If you would be interested in seeing more of these concepts, either trying classic cult books that I've missed out on or doing some bookbinding videos, I'm interested in playing about with both of those next year, so let me know and I will see what I can come up with in the future. I've just reached the end of chapter 6, and that puts me at about the 25% mark. We are just getting to the culmination of some of Bella's suspicions, the real idea that the Cullens might have some kind of supernatural, specifically vampire connection, has just been down for the first time. So I feel like this is a really good time to check in, because up to now we've mostly been doing the high school teen drama, and I have some thoughts. It was really confusing as to why Bella is moving somewhere that she so clearly hates. We don't really get that explained to us for a few chapters. Her mother is quite flighty, has just remarried, and her new husband is, I think it's a baseball player. He's moving around a lot, and Bella has decided instead to move in with Charlie, I guess for some kind of stability. That was a nice little mystery at the start. I was actually more interested in that than I was in the whole vampire storyline. And I think it does set Bella up nicely, that idea. She's quite self-sacrificing, which as a heroine in this type of book, I think obviously is going to be important. And it just bolsters that very brief notion we get in the prologue that she's giving herself up for someone she loves. That echoes that nicely. I was actually really surprised though how quickly and how early we meet the Cullens and Edward specifically. I think the Cullens are first mentioned on something like page 20, which I really wasn't expecting. You can't fault the pacing here. Meyer definitely knows that she has to grab your attention quickly, and she knows that the romance between these two characters, despite all the greater things that are going on, people are here for this romance, and she knows that. She gets us in there quickly, even though we are always firmly in Bella's POV. On the flip side of that, I was surprised at how long it took us to meet Jacob. I've seen bits of some of the films, but most of what I know of Twilight is from the pop culture and from the kind of media representation of it. And I always took Edward and Jacob to be very much equal chances of being the love interest, that whole Team Edward, Team Jacob thing. I always thought that it was a pretty even balance. So I really did expect to see Jacob appear a lot sooner, possibly even before Edward. And then when we do meet him, he's not what I expected. I mean, he is younger than Bella. I wasn't expecting him to be younger, but she thinks that he's maybe 14 or possibly 15. And then he confirms for her that he has just turned 15. So he is a bit younger, but he also feels younger. He feels slightly more naive. She's able to awkwardly flirt him into telling her the entire story of his people, their werewolf background, the cold ones, the fact that the Cullens are vampires and have been there for generations. All of this comes from him so easily with so little prompting. I really got much more of a younger brother, older sister dynamic from them than I did any kind of romance. And I don't know if that's going to change as the book goes on. Maybe we're suddenly going to see a bit of a growth spurt from Jacob, especially in terms of that emotional and romantic connection. But he just wasn't the character that I thought he would be from what I had seen. I can, though, understand Bella's obsession with Edward, because although he is strange and odd and outsiderish and off-putting, the other kids she's dealing with at that high school are 10 times worse. Obviously, she is an incredibly special snowflake. She is different from all the other girls. She's done advanced biology, so she is ahead of the rest of the class. She's already read all the classics that they're studying and is now reading them again for fun, which, I get that, but it does feel like it's trying to make her different from other teenage girls. She listens to classical music enough that she recognizes it when it plays on the radio. And she just very much feels like your stereotypical Mary Sue. She's got an old-fashionedness to her, which I guess I can see the logic for that. The only way that the 17-year-old girl, 400-year-old vampire thing doesn't feel incredibly creepy is if you paint her as an old soul who maybe is more like him than she is like her fellow students. But Other than Edward, there's kind of three boys that are all chasing after her. She gets invited to this dance by Tyler, Mike, and Eric. She has to reject them all. She has to come up with a reason why she can't be at the dance at all. And the girls then seem quite antagonistic towards her. If these were your options, these bitchy, catty girls and these fawning boys that won't really take no for an answer, I can see why creepy old man Edward might be the better option, because at least there's a mystery there to solve, and in this sleepy little town, I can see why you would go towards that. From what I know of the story and from what I've seen of the films, the plot line itself is following fairly straightforward. I think up to this kind of point is roughly maybe where I've seen bits of the film. The idea that she now knows he's a vampire. I really don't know anything that's going to come after this apart from the tree hopping scene. Other than that, I really have no idea what is going to give us another 300 pages in this book. I'm bang on the halfway mark of Twilight. Since my last check-in, we have had Bella do all her research on vampires. We have had Edward save her from a potential mugging or assault. And we've had the two of them spending a lot of time together, playing 20 questions, getting to know each other. And right at the point I've stopped, we have Edward taking his first step out into the sunlight. There have been some really fun moments in this section. The one that really made me smile was the absolute time capsule moment of watching Bella do her vampire research on the internet. She talks about having to wait for the pages to load up and having to shoot down a whole barrage of pop-ups each time she clicks on a link. And that for me just really set the time period so well. That memory of dial-up and having to wait for pages to load, coming back, having to find those little X's that were hidden in the pop-ups to make sure you could get rid of them without jumping to a brand new page. All of that felt so particular of its time, but honestly it made me feel more like this was a book written now and putting in those little references that people who were around back then would catch, rather than something that was actually written at the time. So I salute Stephanie Meyer for that observation of such a trivial daily thing and thinking to put it in the book, because it really sets that time period so well. The other thing that I've really enjoyed in this entire section, I will say, is Edward and Bella. I know. But I really enjoy what a weirdo Edward is, and I think that's maybe where I've got perceptions from, not even just the films but from pop culture, where he's the brooding bad boy, I'm so dangerous for you, but he's sexy and hot and kind of cool. And what I'm getting in this book is, no, he's an actual freak, like a weirdo. And I kind of really like that. He's strange and odd. And I think I would actually really love it if it played into that even more. I don't think it does, but that would have been brilliant. I really like the scene where Edward lets Bella borrow his jacket. I'm sure we're meant to be getting that chivalrous, old-fashioned attitude from it. But instead what I got was that kid with their first pet and not quite understanding how they work. And I think that would have been hilarious if we'd really lent into that. Vampire Edward unable to understand exactly what kind of heat do the humans survive in, and maybe over adjusting for that, constantly trying to put Bella in jackets and jumpers even though it's perfectly warm outside. I think that would have been really fun, and it would have lent into this weirdo that he already seems to be really well. That's actually charmed me in a way that I didn't think it would. I've really enjoyed seeing the two of them awkwardly asking each other all these questions. They've decided to get to know each other in a really intense way that really makes the strangeness of them both come through. And I really like it. I actually, at this stage, I actually think I could really root for the relationship, and I'm almost tempted to continue the series just from where we are now. I actually really like them together, and I guess that's probably the one crucial thing you need to do in this series, is get behind these two as a couple. And I think Stephanie Meyer is actually really convincing me of that. These two freaks belong together, despite everything else. I still think that I had expected to see Jacob more. He has popped up again, but still feels more like a little brother than a potential love interest to me. And he's nowhere near as important or as featured a character as I felt like he would be. But maybe that's something that comes in more in the next book, which from what I remember of the promotion was more to do with the werewolves. We'll see how it goes. I have about 200 pages left. There is still plenty of space for things to change, and I'll check in with you while we finish up binding the book. From that midpoint up until the 2/3 mark, not that much happens in terms of plot. This is where Edward and Bella's relationship is developing. We see them officially come out as boyfriend and girlfriend, both with each other and then with Bella's dad Charlie. Bella and us, the reader, also get to see a lot more of the Cullens in this section. We get to meet Edward's entire family, and we get a bit more backstory, a line or two that explains where each of the vampires came into being. We particularly dive into Carlisle, the father of the group. We get to see his backstory in the 1600s, his revelation about how they could be vampires without killing people, and then a bit of his story and how he chose and then changed Edward, how their lives developed after that. Then around the 3/4 mark, we get the baseball scene. Once it was described, I did remember. I don't know if I saw it in the film or whether I've seen bits of it in trailers, but I did remember them all in their baseball outfits. That leads us pretty much straight up to exactly the 3/4 mark, round about chapter 18, where we have an entirely new threat arrive. 3 brand new vampires turn up at the baseball game: Laurent, Victoria, and James. They seem a little bit edgy, a little bit uncomfortable, and a little more feral than we've seen from the Cullens. There's an awkward moment where everyone plays nice and puts on a show, but there's definitely an edge of violence in the air. And as soon as he can, Edward gets Bella out of there. Almost immediately, Edward, Emmett, Alice, and Jasper are involved in creating a ruse where they're going to get Bella out of town. They're going to get her away from James, who has decided to hunt her down. The action here really goes from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye. It feels really, really sudden. Personally, I felt it was a little too sudden, but I can see the logic behind it. Bella's life changes in the blink of an eye too, so we as the reader are very much getting that sharp, sudden jolt. But personally, I think I would have liked it if we'd maybe just heard a little bit about other vampires that exist in the world, something of an idea of there being other vampire covens, a little bit about the threat that other non-Cullen vampires might possess. It would have just foreshadowed this moment a little better. Also, I found that Edward's mind reading is really convenient in this moment. While we do get a good sense that there is an undercurrent of violence happening while the vampires are talking, there's nothing overt, and Edward then has to explain to Bella that he was able to listen to James's thoughts, that he knows that he is a hunter, that he wants to track people down, he enjoys the thrill of the hunt, and he's decided he's going after her. Edward's powers really, they're a little bit convenient here. As Bella sets off to go on the run, the person that I felt the most sorry for in all of this was Charlie. And I don't know if that's because I am closer to Charlie's age than to the teenagers, but I just felt he really got an emotional beating in this one. Bella, for his own good, to protect her father, tells him that she hates the town, she hates living there, and that she's going home to her mum immediately. And I just felt this was such a hard moment for Charlie. It was really, really brutal. And I can understand why Bella does it. And I think Bella feels the pain of that too. But I personally was just really hurt on poor Charlie's behalf. One of my favourite characters in this section, and it has like 2 lines, was Emmett. I don't know, I love a man with simple wants and simple needs. What makes him happy in life is wrestling bears and watching Bella fall over. That just struck me as hilarious. And I could see him and Edward as this great duo because I'm firmly on team make Edward weirder. The cool bad boy suave Edward that I've seen in pop culture seems to be very different from what we see in the book, and I would actually prefer the book moved even further that way, make him a total freak. And I could totally imagine Bella as this newborn kitten that Edward has brought home. Emmett is recording her for TikTok while she falls over into her food, and Edward is frantically compiling spreadsheets of when to feed the pet, when to wash the pet, what milestones it should be reaching. The two of them just have this really fun dynamic that I personally really enjoyed, and I think it would be good if that develops further. I have no idea if it will, of course. I don't know what's coming in the next books. But personally, I found the Cullens and this section where we got to know more about the Cullens really interesting. I think any of them would have made a great choice for a spin off novel. Obviously, I don't know in the next 3 books whether we find out more about the Cullens in depth. Maybe we do. But to me, going into one of these characters in more depth seems like a far more sensible choice than doing that 5th book that does this story from Edward's point of view. This second half of the book just really flew in for me. The pacing was fantastic, the stakes were insane, and I had a really, really good time with it. I came out of this one thinking that actually, you know what, I would be really interested in going on and reading the next book. I'm not so excited to read it that I am throwing it up to the top of my TBR, that I am running to the shops for a copy, but I definitely think that if something comes up in a readathon where this would fill a prompt, or if it just happens to appear in my library, then I would definitely be down for continuing the series, which is something I did not expect. Another option might be that I wait until whenever the 20th anniversary of New Moon is. I would imagine it will be roughly this time next year, and maybe read it then for its anniversary. We'll see whether that happens, but the fact that I'm even considering moving on to the next book is such a surprise to me. It's not what I expected from reading Twilight, and actually I had a really good time with the book. Yes, it shows its age. Yes, the tropes are really overdone, but a lot of those tropes started in Twilight, so I don't know that you can hold that against it. I do think that the movies, and not even the actual movies, but the reputation the movies got is perhaps fair. Bella's not the most interesting character in the world, but I did enjoy her towards the end, where Meyer makes a point of Bella showing a different type of strength. She's not suddenly able to physically take on another vampire. She's not suddenly got powers like Alice does of seeing the future. But her strength is in her determination. We really see her goodness come through, where she maintains under torture that she does not want Edward to sully himself further by avenging her. She's willing to go and take a risk that she knows is likely to be fatal to protect the family that she loves. And I think she actually showed a lot more agency as a character than I had been led to believe. So as you heard, I did end up enjoying Twilight far more than I thought I would. The impression I've got of it over the years has been too influenced by the movies, and especially just through memes and pop culture. I'm not saying it's a perfect book, and there are definitely issues, especially around Bella, but I found something enjoyable in it, and I can see why it was popular at the time. I am intrigued enough that I would be interested in picking up New Moon at some point in the future. Now, as for the bookbinding itself, I will say that I'm not completely happy with how this turned out. There's a couple of reasons for this. The first being that it's been about 8 months since I tried any bookbinding, and I had forgotten a lot of the minutiae of how to do things. I had forgotten the order that things work best in, and quite frankly, I had lost some of the equipment that I had stored in various places around the house. So it didn't go as smoothly as I would have liked. But overall, I got something that I'm pleased I made it. I've had fun doing it, and hopefully it's going to get me back into this hobby. The design itself, I'm not particularly pleased with either. Sometimes that just happens. When you're creating things in design space, it's all in lines for the cuts, and sometimes the impression that comes out once the cover is actually finished isn't quite the picture you had in your head. The other thing that didn't work quite as well as I thought it would was the actual application of the HTV, which is the heat transfer vinyl. I thought at first that this was because there's quite a lot of glitter HTV on this project. You can see, well, maybe you can see the letters are all glittery, they all sparkle. But glitter HTV it's harder to cut because it's thicker, but actually the Cricut handled that no problem. Where I had issues with was transferring the glitter vinyl to the cover itself. Again, that's because it's slightly thicker, it's harder for the heat to permeate it. And I was a bit confused because I have worked with glitter in the past. This is the copy of Wicked that I bound up last year, and it also has some glittery elements on it, although admittedly they're not as big or as prevalent, and those transferred on with absolutely no problems whatsoever. The issue with the Twilight cover, I think, is actually in the fabric I used to bind the book. I picked a material that has a sort of sheen to it supposedly, which I don't really think you can see, but essentially that coating is acting a bit like a plastic seal, and I think that made it harder for the HTV to actually bond to it, whereas if this had just been a woven fabric, that would have been a lot easier. So the process itself was just a little more fiddly than I had been expecting. Still, I had a good time though, and I hope that maybe seeing this process, if you've been interested, has made it seem more achievable, more realistic. I know there are lots of bookbinding videos available on YouTube and on Instagram and on TikTok, but I feel like they're all really professional and they're producing really high quality products that for me, when I was starting to look into this last year, seemed just out of my reach. It seemed like you needed so much equipment, so much skill, so much time and space, and I just didn't have any of that. I'm hoping that if this is something that you were vaguely interested in, this video might make you think that you too would be able to at least give it a go, give it a try, and have a good time with it, whether or not it's something that you really want to work to elevate or not. If you'd like to see any more of these types of videos from me, whether that is bookbinding, whether it is reading books that I feel like I have missed off the cult classic canon, or whether it is particularly going through the rest of the Twilight books, then do let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on Twilight. Did you read it 20 years ago? Are you interested in reading it or rereading it now that the anniversary is upon us? Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to, please like and subscribe, and I really hope I'm going to see you in the next video. Goodbye.